No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 273. And breaking today, Essex explodes after hard-left Antifa protesters infiltrate a peaceful demonstration by locals at Epping's Bell Hotel after an Ethiopian illegal migrant in the country for just 8 days was charged with 3 sex assaults on young girls.
In all my years, I never thought we would see something like this in Epping. Look, there are literally dozens, maybe even 100 riot police in front of this hotel. Obviously a hotel marred in controversy and a hotel that has been linked to many incidents in this town.
So why did the Essex police treat the hard-left infiltrators in a completely different way to the patriotic locals? And how can we ever deal with the true anger when we have The Guardian already deriding patriotic granddads, dads, brothers and sons as far right? I'll give you the real story the MSM won't tell you in my digest next, then my superstar panel weigh in. Britain's most renowned historian and broadcaster, Doctor David Starkey CBE, and director of the Heartland Institute for the UK and Europe, Lois. Also coming up on the show today, Zia Yusuf in an anti-Semitic ex-post scandal. Do you believe his excuse, or should reform finally get rid? Diane Abbott goes to war with slippery Starmer after being suspended from Labour for racism again. Will she end up rekindling with ex-lover Jeremy Corbyn at the Hopeless Party? Jess, Phillips and Sadiq Khan's deputy refused to acknowledge the elephant in the room when it comes to the Muslim rape gangs. We'll analyse the mortifying LBC and City Hall appearances. And TV's Salem witch trials continue as it emerges John Turode was sacked from MasterChef by the BBC simply for repeating a Kanye West rap at a bar years ago. By the way, he doesn't even remember it. Then, in the uncancelled aftershow on Substack, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been exposed for breaking the law by Oprah Winfrey in a shocking story involving the illegal transportation of ducks. We'll get into the consequences with our royal mastermind, Angela Levin, and you can sign up to watch at www.outspoken.live. Of course, because it's Friday, we're also going to be unveiling the worst Briton in the world this week. This is when we put your uni and jackass winners from Monday to Thursday head to head. Here are today's nominees, and you can vote in the posts tab on YouTube right now. From Monday, it was Darren Jones. Tuesday, Jane Delvez. She's the principal of the school that sent the little girl in the Union Jack dress home. Wednesday, Zia Yusuf, the Reform UK chairman. And Thursday, Rishi Sunak, former Prime Minister. You know why. You know why. The Afghan migrant cover-up. Why are the media just letting Sunak get away with this? By the way, we need to hear from this Prime Minister. So, lots to get to today. But now, let's go. Essex exploded last night. Now, the mainstream media will, of course, tell you that this was all down to far-right supporters. But as usual, they're lying to you. They're concealing what really happened, and they're undermining the reality that Britain is on the brink because ordinary patriots have had enough of their wives, their girlfriends, their daughters, their granddaughters being sexually assaulted by illegal migrants who have invaded their communities and are being paid by us to live in luxury hotels. So unlike the MSM, you'll know I have been tracking this story of what's going on at the Bell Hotel in Epping for a week now. The local community have rightly been peacefully protesting the hotel after 38-year-old Ethiopian illegal Hadush Gerbasali Kabuta was charged with a spree of 3 sex assaults in just 2 days on the Epping High Street after arriving on a small boat just 8 days before his alleged crimes. Now, amongst those crimes, he is charged with asking a schoolgirl aged 14 if she wanted to make Jamaican babies just before the sex attack. The Daily Mail covered the Save Our Kids protest, writing, that one of the demonstrators told how the whole of Essex was united in opposition to housing asylum seekers in their town. The 74-year-old retired company director, who declined to give his name, said, "We are all absolutely sick of it. They should all be sent back to where they've come from. If they came in a small boat from France, then they should be sent back to France. It's absolutely outrageous that we have to pay for them, the food, their accommodation, their phones, everything." Now, here's the thing. These demonstrations, which, as I say, I have covered over the past week, and well done to the independent journalists like Adam Brooks, who have been there, Eddie, Emma Dunwell, they've done really great work. And they have been entirely peaceful, attended by patriotic locals, including, by the way, lots of women and children. But every time hard left Antifa agitators from the group Stand Up to Racism have then been shipped in, because these are the locals, right? You can see there, they're not hard right. But look at this lot that have been shipped in to try and provoke trouble. Now, this is a tactic we've seen used a lot by Antifa stateside and also during last year's Southport unrest. Now, what caused the specific trouble last night is when Epping police, and you can see it here, they actually escorted Antifa from the train station to the Bell Hotel to confront the locals who were protesting in police vans. And as the Grift report explained, proof Epping police escorted Antifa from the train station to the Bell Hotel to confront the locals who were protesting. These people are paid £40 to £60 a day to do this and hold all the same signs and agitate. Things were fine until the police bust them in police vans. People need to know the truth. The police and council are complicit. And adding weight today is the brilliant independent journalist Lois, a friend of the show, he's going to be here on Monday actually, who has said, "I am investigating the possible coordination and facilitation of far-left counter-protesters by police and local authorities during the 17th of July protest outside the Bell Hotel in Epping. Video evidence captured by various citizen journalists shows counter-protesters arriving and departing in police vans, with one officer referring to the vans as buses. The individuals involved appeared to be affiliated with activist groups such as Stand Up to Racism and similar far-left networks. Their movement in and out of the protest site was managed separately from the main demonstrators." Now, the Essex police, when they responded, and this is what's quite interesting, they haven't actually clarified where the disorder came from. So they said, "We're responding to disorder in Epping tonight, where peaceful protests were disrupted by violent behaviour. Suspects have been identified for vehicle damage, officer assault and vandalising property. This behaviour does not represent Epping. Those responsible will face justice." Now look, I'm not going to play you, for reasons to do with YouTube censorship, unfortunately, the most horrendous clip from last night, which showed quite clearly a police van careering through patriotic protesters and running someone over, a tactic that they've never used, I point out, with the Extinction Rebellion mob. And as the Grift report also noted, "We are hearing that the protest in Epping was peaceful until the police escorted Antifa right down to where the protesters were, and then it went nuts as these agitators started attacking the protesters and then started dragging them away in police vans. And then the police drove a police van into the protesters and then everything went crazy. If this is true, then the police are 100% to blame." And look, you can watch that video on X. Don't recommend it, but you can see it. The vision later in the night was chilling. It showed just how much things had escalated. Look, that is Essex. That is Essex. Can you believe it? Let's not normalize this. But my friend Adam Brooks, who was on the ground, explained there were two very different situations tonight in Epping. Hundreds of people gathered at the Bell Hotel to protest the migrant hotel in town, one that has seen numerous incidents against local women and children. This was peaceful and full of elderly, women, and kids. What then happened was the police escorted 50 Antifa down towards the hotel with masks on and covered faces. The riot police then had to kettle those extremists into a side street due to loads of local teenagers and youths coming out to challenge them. What we've seen is not good, but questions have to be asked. Why are Antifa allowed to turn up for trouble with masks on? That sparked the violence seen in Epping tonight, nothing else. This is not a far-right protest. It's a town of worried parents, uncles, and grandparents. And this was his final report from the scene.
Like, in all my years, I never thought we would see something like this in Epping. Look, there are literally dozens, maybe even 100 riot police in front of this hotel. Obviously a hotel marred in controversy and a hotel that has been linked to many incidents in this town over the last few years, and especially last week. It started off as a peaceful protest, but then when the so-called anti-racist or anti-fascists turn up, Epping turned into violent disorder. I'm now being told that the police, the chief of police that is in charge here has issued a 10:30 dispersal order, meaning that anyone here after 10:30 can be arrested. Let's see if the locals decide to listen to that order. This is absolutely crazy.
But of course, the MSM coverage entirely focused on this non-existent far right. But as Martin Daubney explained, what's also missing from this account is that anti-racists from outside the area were once again shipped in and given police escorts. Those there claimed this significantly aggravated the situation. Away day socialists were shipped in to rev things up. From Charlie Sanson, what we're seeing in Epping over the Migrant Bell Hotel and the abuse of children by illegals isn't far right. People, especially parents, are naturally concerned by the importation of foreigners who are sexually assaulting our kids. Outrage on the streets was inevitable. Will Kingston agreed. He says this will sadly become more common in the months and years ahead. People have had enough. And Chris Rose warned ominously, sadly, scenes like this were always inevitable. The UK could easily slip into civil war. Now to analyse. Britain's preeminent historian, Doctor David Starkey CBE, and the UK and Europe Heartland Institute chief, Lois Perry. Dr. David Starkey, a pleasure to have you back. You've been warning of this type of unrest. What do you make of what you've seen outside the Bell Hotel in Essex?
Everything one feared, everything one didn't want. I think there's something else very important to say, Dan. We have managed in Britain, virtually uniquely in Europe, to avoid this kind of thing. We do not have a tradition of legitimated political violence. You do in Ireland, of course, both sides of the border. You do in France, you do in Germany, in Italy. We'd avoided it. This has been, I think, one of the most terrible, I'm an old man, I'm 80. This has been, I think, of many terrible developments, the worst. This is politicized violence. We tiny inklings of it in the 1930s. This threatens to be much worse. In the 1930s, it was essentially limited to tiny areas of London. The peculiar thing about this, did you notice what everybody was saying? Here in Epping, here in Essex, what's happened, Dan, is that a metropolitan fascination, the fascination that we must put the world, the whole world, before Britain, that the interests of the native population come last. That's a metropolitan obsession. But the consequences of it have been visited on provincial England that never asked for it, provincial England that never voted for it, provincial England that has to suffer, not the smart people in Islington, not the smart people in the Palace of Westminster, not the smart people in Hampstead. They can sit back over their lattes and say, aren't these little people disgusting? Shouldn't they read The Guardian too? And it is a terrible problem. We've now got simply not street violence, but we've got a widening gap between an indifferent, superior, sneering governing class that actually think they embody virtue, looking on the great mass of the native population, and Dan, I'm going to dare to use that word, the native population, simply
I think you should.
And I'm really speechless. In fact, I'm known for talking too much. But at this stage, you do find yourself speechless. And the evidence here, I mean, what seems to me to be getting worse and worse and worse. We've been used, as we saw with another incident that you've been talking about, with the Afghanistan cover-up. We've been used to a policy of lies. We've been used right to the beginning, the use of the term far right as a kind of concealment of justified resentment. But what we're seeing now is the active participation of the police and the state in these so-called counter-protests. And I think you're doing an enormously important job in exposing them. I don't know whether you've also caught up with something else. The key group, what you're seeing there, the Stand Up to Racism lot, the Antifa, they're the foot soldiers of this lot. Those who go around with, pre-printed signs that go around masked up and all the rest of it. But behind them, there are really sinister groups like Hope Not Hate that act as a kind of intelligence of this. And do you know what has just happened? There is emerging, and I'm not going to say it's proof, but there is very strong evidence of state participation. One of their agents provocateurs has been found using a fake passport in a fake name, with the fake place of issue, all the rest of it, which actually is a real passport, with all the biometric and other documentary details incorporated into it. That can only come from the Secret Services. Again, we've got to start telling the truth. Again, I'm not sure that I can hear myself saying it. If I had ever thought that I would talk about a deep state conspiracy, I would have thought I'd gone mad. This is the sort of stuff, dare I say it, Dan, of shows like yours. What am I?
Welcome to the club, David. Come on in.
People. What about you? But do you know what? You were right.
Yeah.
You were right. And this is...
Well, you can't look at what's happened over the last week and say that there was not a deep state conspiracy.
No, precisely, but it goes beyond that. I know from my own experience, you kindly flagged up my ridiculous little honour, the CBE. There was an organised attempt at depriving me of it, run by the Cabinet Office. And do you know what? It actually acts as a special tribunal. It takes evidence in secret. You are not allowed to know who has accused you. It arrives at a provisional verdict before you're told, and you've got to argue against it. This is the home of liberty, the mother of parliaments. This is what's happened to us. So everywhere you look, there is this. Unfortunately, what there isn't is a coordinated attempt at fighting it. Beyond the right of fighting each other, we are behaving as fools. We have an enemy that knows what it's doing, an enemy that can call on the resources of the state, the money of the state, the armed power of the state, the intelligence of the state, because I'm afraid the armed forces and the police are riddled with this stuff, totally riddled with this stuff. And there we are. Again, a king who, you remember, in conversation with the president of France, standing, actually not in conversation, at the welcoming banquet, says, there are no borders. No borders. A king without a nation, a country with no borders isn't a country.
No.
He's saying he's a king of...
Nothing.
Nothing.
I know. I mean, it's appalling. And King Charles is a whole other issue. But look, Lois Perry, of course, first and foremost, you're an Essex girl, right?
I am. Yeah, like your mum.
Like my mum. Essex, amazing place. And I did always think Essex would probably be one of the first places in the country to rise up. But what do you feel like as an Essex girl watching your hood being torn to pieces?
Well, I'm extremely saddened to see my home county, such a horrible event happening. But I always thought, like just what you just said, that things, when they kicked off in Essex, would actually maybe be a turning point. I mean, the Peasants' Revolt was led by Wat Tyler, who was from Basildon before it was called Basildon, and we ended up with the Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta. I'm sure if I've got anything wrong, Dr. Starkey will correct me. But there's something very special.
No, too much trouble.
But there's something very special about Essex, and
there is.
So half of me is devastated, obviously, but the other half of me thinks they've pushed it too far this time, because when you push Essex, big things happen. Look at Boudica, and Boleyn spent a huge part of her childhood in Essex. It's a special place with special people who change things. Their own county, but for the whole of the United Kingdom permanently. But yeah, obviously on a personal level, who wants to see their home county with things like this going on? And it's so obvious now, so obvious and so terrifying, as Dr. Starkey just pointed out, that the government is complicit, which means the people that are supposed to protect us are involved, which means you start looking into all sorts of conspiracies, you start going down rabbit holes, you think you're mad, and then we need to stay resolute and strong and look at the evidence that's presented to us, because if Dr. Starkey's saying that, then there's definitely something in it, definitely.
But David, where does... Sorry, David, you come in.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say, the question of evidence, which Lois has mentioned there, one of the things that's most striking is the absolute refusal of the government to put evidence into the public domain and even to collect it. And here I think we need to give a major uptick to Rupert Lowe, who has been campaigning for the whole evidence on the racial statistics of sex crime, supported by Robert Jenrick, supported by Reform MPs, bitterly opposed by the Labour Party. And it is this sense, I'm learning a new language. I believe it's called gaslighting.
Yes, it is. It is. And we have been gaslit on a great level, David.
You've no idea. And sorry, I'm making little jokes because they're a signal of my sense of disorientation. But remember, Britain pioneered accurate statistics. We are one of the first countries to collect them. They are absolutely necessary to sound government, to sound money, to sound administration. That has collapsed too. That's starting a march here. But part of the reason for our present collapse economically is, again, the proper business of keeping statistics. Genuine, honest, unbiased political statistics are stopped. But it's most conspicuous in terms of justice because they cannot confront the truth. Again, this is one of the enormous problems of the left. The left believes in a mythical world. It believes in a world in which we're all the same, we're all equal. Somebody who arrives, we heard about this immigrant, has arrived 3 or 4 days ago, fresh from this extraordinary journey from Afghanistan, bribing everybody at every point with money acquired God only knows how, handing it over to people that, would shoot you in the knees first and then shoot you thoroughly second. And people soaked in alien cultures, in violence and everything else. But you know what? Miraculously, they cross the channel. And what do they become? They become a Welsh choir boy. It's a miracle. You wave a hand. Usually blessed by some transgender Syrian Church of England priest. You wave a hand. You wave a hand and a miracle happens. Have you noticed how that strange mixture of the Antifa group? Go back and look at them. You get the big worked up thugs, those who've obviously been working out, the ones in masks and tight t-shirts, and then you get lots and lots of ladies, nice ladies, all looking like retired school teachers. These are the, to use intellectual is perverting the word, but these are the people who believe, again, I'm learning new words, this crap. They are the ones who actually believe this nonsense. Oh, we're all the same. Isn't it wicked to... the word discriminate, it should be a good word. It means choosing between good and bad, native and foreign, beauty and ugly, but it's been turned into a word we can't use anymore. The moment you lose that sense, I think you lose everything. But
no, I agree totally. Dr. Starkey, can I just come in though?
David, for God's sake.
Oh, David. I know, I keep calling you that, don't I? David.
It's called natural authority.
You're a very respectful young lady,
natural
Lois.
authority. When we had dinner the other night, we were talking about the practicalities of stopping this happening. And I said that I felt that some of Rupert Lowe's tweets and the things that he'd said were a little bit disingenuous, because he was making out that it was much easier to deport people than it actually is. And it made Nigel Farage look bad, because he was saying, right, we can't do it straight away. We have to lead the ECHR first, and it will be a process. So he was saying practical things. And Rupert, bless him, was saying what he wanted people to hear. So I think it's very important to note at this point that leaving the ECHR is the only way that we're going to be able to stop these people coming in.
And I should just point out,
Nigel.
Yeah, I should just point out, by the way, just for people who may not know, although we have spoken about it, David, you are now a advisory board member for Restore Britain, which is
Correct.
Rupert Lowe's political movement rather than a party. And I think, Lois, it's fair to say you're very much Team Farage when it comes to the split on the right.
David is consulting to us as well.
Can I just, exactly, as Lois has said, again, Dan, I think you would be sympathetic to this idea. Dan, I am a political whore. I advise anybody, you'll be completely sympathetic on this. I advise everybody for free, which means I'm a very bad whore, and I shan't turn to you, Lois, at this point. But what my position is, again, it's really important. Lois has said that we need to repeal the ECHR. The point is that this horror that we've been describing, this horror of putting the rest of the world ahead of Britain, not Britain first, but Britain last, is completely entrenched in our structures of state and our structures of law. That all of that has got to be undone if we're to have any chance of turning back the boats, if we're to have any chance of recovering our country, any chance of sorting out our economy. And I call it the Great Repeal. And Lois is right, it's going to be an enormous task. I think it will consume the energies of any new government, where again other people that I'm dealing with are working on the actual legislative program. But we all need to understand that, and again, I find myself shocked at what I'm saying. What is going on is not accidental. When everybody talks about two-tier justice, it's not, or two-tier care. It's not just a sort of, sentencing of courts looks irregular. Somebody gets 30-odd months for a tweet, whereas sex offenders are actually released. It is absolutely built into the law. The law of the ECHR is deliberately anti-democratic. It's deliberately counter-majoritarian. It deliberately prioritizes minorities. And do you know what? The man who is largely responsible for this, the now dead First Law Lord, Lord Bingham, actually lists the minorities that the law protects. And do you know what the first one on the list is? The mentally sick. So like Ruda Kabbalah and Kalokane, the Roma, the kind of people who blew up Sheffield, the foreign asylum seeker, the people that are committing to an extraordinarily high percentage. And if you actually look at the number of them and the number of sex crimes they're responsible for, a staggeringly high percentage of them, Somalis, Afghanis, and so on, are hugely over-proportionately represented. But the law is determined to diminish that. The whole operation, now to name check somebody else, Robert Jenrick pointing out the extraordinary behavior of the Sentencing Council, which said that in the case of women and all forms of religious or racial minorities, there should be a pre-sentencing report, a social services report, which is almost invariably the first step in a reduced sentence. Now, we used to have equality before the law. This is the paradox, that enacting universal human rights and the Equalities Act actually introduces legalized inequality. We have an apartheid, except whites come bottom. That is the truth. And it's not prejudice. It's not simply because Starmer likes it that way, though it's quite clear that he does. That is actually the law. We will only break from this by political means, by undoing these bad laws, which they act like a kind of steel cage, holding us, the natives, down. It's intolerable.
The other major breaking story today is a political one, and it poses a very big question that I have been coming back to all week. What does Zia Yusuf have on Nigel Farage, and why is the Reform UK leader staying loyal to someone who is now clearly damaging this movement? So here's the latest in case you haven't seen what's gone on today. A clearly racist post on an account called Radical Chauvinism 1 on X said, reminder that Jenrick, referring to Robert Jenrick, is a traitorous Zogbot with a Jewish wife and family. I'm sure it's unrelated that he imported infinite brown savages to rape our women and children. Now, that post on X was liked by Zia Yusuf. How do we know this, you might say? Well, if you see this screen recording that was released, the account in question actually released this, and as you see, it will scroll down through all of the likes and the various people who have liked that, I believe, very clearly anti-Semitic and racist post. And eventually you come to the under fire Reform UK, head of Doge, former chairman, man who's causing trouble, man who caused Rael Braverman to leave the party. Oh, look, there he is. There he is. Now, for a couple of hours earlier today, there was silence. But this post, Radical Chauvinism, said quite clearly, I give my word, this is true. I am so little based that a Reformite likes my post. So he was saying, look, this is true. And then I checked with Grok, which is the AI tool used by X, which said, okay, so based on X data from this tweet, are you telling me that Zia Yusuf liked this? And Grok confirmed, yes, absolutely, Zia Yusuf did. Then other critics of Yusuf weighed in. Tommy Robinson posted, WTF are you doing with this wrongin', Nigel Farage? And eventually, we got the Zia Yusuf apology. We got the confirmation that, yes, he had indeed, via his account, liked this post. But there's a pretty, I would say, unbelievable excuse. He wrote, one of the team who post to my X account accidentally pressed like on an awful anti-Semitic tweet earlier today. I apologize for this. The post also refers to brown savages and is equally racist against me. Clearly, it was not intentional. The amount of anti-Semitism and racism on this platform is spiraling out of control, and I hope that changes soon. Now, two ways of looking at this. First, free speech. Does it really matter if Zia Yusuf is anti-Semitic? Well, I would argue, given this is a guy who has introduced the most stringent vetting policies to Reform UK, yes, it does, because the irony in this situation is Zia Yusuf wouldn't be passing his own vetting policies at the moment, not even close. And then, of course, the second point is that this is a man who reported Rupert Lowe to the police. And he reported Rupert Lowe to the police over hurty words. Now, anti-Semitism is arguably, I don't necessarily think it should be, but arguably illegal. There's also a big issue for Farage and Reform UK in that this is not a one-off. Anytime Zia Yusuf gets in trouble on his social media accounts, he blames an invisible member of staff. Do you remember the BBC reporting in regards to his time as the head of the Velocity Black concierge company? Here's the reporting here. She said she had already blocked him on the messaging service WhatsApp. She warned she would take it further if it continued and suggested others had been contacted in the same way. These were inappropriate messages. And through lawyers, Yusuf said the accusation was false and that he had employed someone to manage his social media accounts during that period. So my big question today is, and I repeat, what does Zia Yusuf have on Nigel Farage? When will Nigel Farage regain control of his party? Why is this unelected buffoon being allowed to do so much damage, not just to the Reform UK cause, but actually to the cause of saving Britain, because that's how important this next election is? And can I just stress again, when he has been on this absolute rampage over the past few days, about both Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, claiming that they should be locked up because they simply sat around the cabinet table at the time of the Afghan injunction, when they had nothing to do with it, by the way, and they were legally unable to mention it. Can I just say that the man who was a member of the Conservative Party until August 2024, after the last election, was one Zia Yusuf? So I'm fascinated to debate this with my superstar panel today because, of course, Lois Perry, head of the Heartland Institute for the UK and Europe, is very well known as a Farageist, very loyal to Nigel Farage. David Starkey, you are, but you also have a foot in the other camp as this advisory board member for Restore Britain. And look, I guess the issue is here, David, how long can Farage take this constant drama coming from an unelected former chairman of the party? Like, no one else in Reform UK would be allowed to like a tweet like that and stay in their job. Zia Yusuf has sacked people from their jobs, David, for tweets far less offensive, for criminal offences that were committed 30 years ago. This can't go on, can it?
Again, I really don't want to comment on the private agonies of the right. I find this almost something to weep about, that we are wasting our time, having to waste our time. I'm not denying that you need to be talking about it. I'm just profoundly regretful that this person is where he is, and this is the issue that it is. This is the kind of awful divisiveness that you expect on the far left. I mean, if you remember when Sultana and dear old Jeremy Corbyn decided to have a party, they actually managed to split it before it was formed. We are imitating this terrible behavior. I share your puzzlement. Now, I do not have Lois's inside views on this. I've only ever once watched Zia Yusuf perform when it seemed to me that he was high on something. And I also had a smell, again, words now of an older generation, the smell of the spiv. And what you were saying about his earlier activities, commercial activities, I'm afraid reinforces that. I cannot see what Nigel benefits at all, unless, again, trying as far as possible to pull myself away, he is acting as an attack dog, as a licensed attack dog. And if that is true, then I'm afraid it raises the terrible question, which again, Nigel has got profound talents. His success is not accidental. It's really important. I mean, let's look at that other big issue of the day. Let's look at the business of the so-called, Afghans who'd helped us so much in Afghanistan. He was the one who got it right from the very beginning.
Correct.
These were hired hands. Nobody, not even Rupert Lowe, recognised that, frankly, we were having a fast one pulled over. So
and Richard Tice didn't realise either.
Richard Tice, again, Robert Jenrick didn't, just to show that I'm really trying to be completely even-handed on this. Nigel has shown throughout this extraordinary ability to read the room, this strategic sense. On the other hand, his management of every party that he's been involved with has been profoundly problematic. And this is, for me, the great fear, that we will only have one shot if by a miracle the right wins in 2029. It's got to be a government that's coordinated. You cannot run. I mean, the great problem with Nigel is that it always seems to have to be a one-man band. Government in democracy is not a one-man band. Thatcher, with all her force of personality, her extraordinary hard work, her intelligence, needed allies. You've got to be able to manage people. You don't have a soiled attack dog. You really don't. And those are my theories.
Okay, well, Lois, let's let Lois come in, because Lois, obviously, you are uber close to Nigel, personally, professionally, and why you must have some understanding, Lois, about why he is not forgiving anyone else, right? Because he's not. He's been utterly hardline about anyone else who makes the smallest mistake, the smallest indiscretion. He's like, no, I've got to go because there's a bigger plan here. We've got to get into number 10. But Zia Yusuf is able to run riot.
Zia Yusuf, I know. I'll just start by saying I know Zia well. I work alongside him with various projects and things like that. He also works very closely with the National Jewish Assembly, which is headed up by Gary Mond, to work against anti-Semitism and to promote Jewish life, even though his background is that he is Muslim. Okay, so this bloke is not anti-Semitic whatsoever. And why would he personally like a tweet that describes him as a brown savage? It doesn't make any sense to me that he would do that. And what I would argue is that we are doing the uni party's work for them at the moment. And David made a point about it's almost as if things are happening that are so bad that it's coming in from another direction. The reason why Nigel has seemingly looked like there's problems managing people is because there's so many deep states, if you like, vested interests that want to break him up, that want to break up his movement, and they do not want a reform government in. So the first thing I'll say is that Zia is not anti-Semitic. He hasn't got anything on Nigel, but what he has got, until Zia came in, the party had no branches. It had no branch chairman. There was no organisation. Zia Yusuf single-handedly built the party backwards. He had to build a party in just under a year, which has taken the Tories over 200 years and the Labour Party over 100 years to build up all of that infrastructure. Reform UK is a party structurally because of Zia Yusuf. He's a brilliant brain. He's a brilliant mind. He came up with the ticker thing about the different amount of people that are joining. He made sure that every single member has to register to vote. And if they hadn't registered to vote, we would facilitate and help that. So what he's got on Nigel is that he's brilliant. No deep, dark secrets. Believe me, I'd know. Okay? There's no deep, dark secrets. Zia is just a very, very good operator. And I think
he's a terrible operator because the amount of people who he has fallen out with who are so critical to this movement. I mean, what he did to Rael Braverman and Suella Braverman, insanity.
No, I must. He went too far with it. I'm not saying he's perfect, Dan.
No one is. No one is. Well, look, can I show you both what Robert Jenrick has said on this? Because remember, it is Robert Jenrick's wife who was attacked in this post, and it is Robert Jenrick who Zia Yusuf has been coming after all week, and he hasn't held back.
Wouldn't he? Because he's a Tory. That would be part of his brief.
But he hasn't held back. So look, I've got to show you what he said. He said, I call bullshit, his words, not mine. You've spent the last 48 hours calling me a traitor for not drawing attention to a leaked spreadsheet with our special forces and MI6 officer's name on. But we're meant to believe this tweet attacking me as a traitor for having a Jewish wife and family was liked accidentally by one of your team. You must think we're all thick. No, the mask has slipped. Likes are private. You thought nobody would ever know. Unfortunately for you, the racist account who posted the tweet and could see the likes exposed you. Reform should give you the boot. Now, the problem that he has, David Starkey, is that Robert Jenrick is fully within his rights to now go for Yusuf in this way, given Yusuf has spent all week advocating for him to be jailed for something that wasn't his fault. Advocate for Ben Wallace to be jailed, or Rishi Sunak to be jailed, or Grant Shapps to be jailed, or James Heapy to be jailed, right? The people who were actually behind this. But he went for Robert Jenrick and he went for Suella Braverman for political reasons.
That is absolutely true. he was acting as I said, as an attack dog. The thing that I think reform, if you look at reform as a destructive, we've been talking about it as something constructive, but if we look at it as a destructive movement, it's determined, and Nigel has said as much, and Zia has multiplied it, to destroy the Conservative Party. The great threat to Nigel and to reform, viewed in a destructive sense, are Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman. So what you try to do, just like Alistair Campbell, is to implicate them, is to throw dirt at them, to make sure that the crisis over Afghanistan, is firmly pinned on them with absolutely no evidence. But just going back to what Lois said, of whom I am very fond and we are personal friends, but can I just gently point out, she described Zia's role in building up a party, in organizing, in acting as the great backroom boy. Now, those are very, very important qualities, but they're the qualities that should be kept behind closed doors. Unfortunately, he's also been used as the public face, the attack dog. He's been used like Alistair Campbell. And in theory, of course, what you're supposed to do if you are, by the way, you know that wonderful phrase of one of my great academic heroes, Francis Cornford, on propaganda. Propaganda, that branch of the art of lying, right? I mean, Campbell ceased to be good at that job for Tony Blair, although he was a master of lying, makes Machiavelli look like an amateur.
Yeah,
but
when he became the story.
He ceased when he, you said it yourself, when he became the story. The problem is now Yusuf is the story. Yusuf is getting more attention than Nigel. Yusuf, again, his underhand behavior has been publicly irreversible, and I would argue irreversibly exposed. I'm afraid, again, there's something else that has to be said. Leadership is about choosing. You have to choose. Nigel will have to choose. It's as simple as that.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I really hope he does make the right choice. Now, how can we have a discussion in the United Kingdom about the threat of Islam and about the fact that other cultures are being imported and quite clearly putting our young women at risk, as we've seen with those protests that turned very nasty outside the Bell Hotel in Epping, Essex, if our leaders, including our Minister for Women, refuses to even talk about what we all know is a very, very obvious issue. I'm talking about Jess Phillips, of course. I think a traitor to women. Basil the Great posted on this. Jess Phillips refuses to admit migrants commit sex crimes at a higher rate. She's been asked this time after time, and again, she refuses to say anything other than men are the problem. Does she just hate men, or is she terminally thick? Well, I would actually argue, Basil the Great, there's a different answer. Actually, she doesn't want to offend Muslims because she knows that her seat was nearly taken away by an Islamist party. We're going to get reaction to her absolute sickening denial from Doctor David Starkey CBE and Lois Perry, head of the Heartland Institute, in just one moment. But first, you'll be angry. You'll be angry, but you've got to watch Jess Phillips with Tom Swarbrick.
Afghans are 20%, according to these numbers, 20 times more likely to account for sex offence convictions than British people. Does that concern you?
I mean, like, I have to look across all of this data and think about where I have to really focus and target resources on the prevention work that I am determined to do.
Do you think there are people in this country who have a culturally very, very different view of women and therefore are more likely to be engaged in these kinds of activities?
Which culture doesn't have patriarchy and misogyny in it? Because
do you think?
I mean, like I have seen victims and perpetrators from every single walk of life.
Do you think we are a fundamentally misogynistic?
I tell you what the group of people who are most likely to abuse, that is men.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I will yield to a woman.
That'll be the first time, David. So no, do you know what embarrasses me the most about her? I mean, obviously, the fact that she's completely and utterly, she's not deluded, actually. She knows exactly what she's saying. And it's exactly for the reasons that you said. She's got a seat, which is so marginal. It's unbelievable. And she nearly lost it to a Muslim party. She doesn't want to offend Muslims. And almost all of the people that are coming over that are committing these offences are coming from countries where the predominant religion is Islam. But can I just say, on a slightly silly point, and then I'll go back to being serious, she is a real embarrassment to women. She is such a slob, isn't she? I mean, I wouldn't even open the door to the milkman dressed like that. And yet she goes on national television. She's an embarrassment.
Look, it's the left. It's the left. They don't look after themselves, do they? Men or women. But I mean, David Starkey, the fact that she is meant to be responsible for women's safety, she cannot even acknowledge cold, hard statistics. We're screwed. We are screwed.
What I said right at the beginning, facts, the left does not like facts. The facts of life are conservative. That's the problem. So the left has to lie, which she does abundantly, and it's got to stop us telling the truth, which is why there are the limitations on freedom of speech that there are. But can we just go back and really pull apart this woman further? In the campaign, in the election campaign last year, she was up day and night saying, I am being subject to assault, I am being subject to the most terrible misogynistic remarks, and she made perfectly clear they were actually coming from Muslims. At her victory speech, she was actually called out. And what does she do? Immediately she's elected, hanging on, as you said, by her fingernails. You will remember it's then followed promptly by the riots, some of which are in her own constituency. And it's in her own constituency that there is the most extraordinary episode where a Muslim police officer tells an armed gang of Muslims to put their weapons back in the mosque. Nobody will pay any attention to it. So this woman is not simply lying repeatedly. She is actually complicit in law breaking.
Yeah.
A minister of the crown. And this is, I mean, we are, again, my new word, there's the gaslighting.
Yeah, we are.
But it is going infinitely beyond that. It is actually and remember, there's something else that we haven't talked about. She whitters on about patriarchy, you know, the feeble stuff of every gender studies course, the kind of thing that our feeblest undergraduates have their brains rotted with. What's going on with very large groups, the essential Pakistani grooming gangs, they're not gangs, they're clans. Their uncles, brothers, cousins, and remember, brothers and cousins are often pretty much the same thing because everybody intermarries so much. These groups are absolutely resistant to law, to our law, and the police have indulged this. The other catastrophe, why is all of this happening? It largely goes back to the disasters of the Lawrence affair, the terrible murder of Lawrence, but the Macpherson report, which you know, this terrible accusation of institutional racism, then the entire policies of the police, we've got to recruit depending on the communities that we police. Therefore, you get official groups of Black and Muslim police. Yeah. Can you actually imagine it? Again.
100%. But this is all coming, and I mean, there's another example actually, which I think is actually potentially even more shocking because this isn't an immediate interview; it's actually in a formal setting. So Susan Hall, also a member of Restore Britain, but she's the lead Conservative on the London Assembly, has been pushing Sadiq Khan, right, to even just admit that Pakistani Muslim gangs exist in London, which the BBC even now admit is totally true. Now, you've got to look at this woman. God knows where they got her from. Kaya Kuma Schwartz.
I keep getting that response and nobody will answer me straight. Do we or do we not have these grooming gangs, or I call them rape gangs, in London? It's a yes or a no or a I don't know, isn't it?
We have obviously always had ongoing oversight on paedophilia and sexual exploitation of children, projects like the Lighthouse to support children.
No, I know
who've been
that. So are they the same as the grooming gangs that we're seeing all over the country? Yes or no?
Sorry, Assemblymember Hall, do you want me to provide a hierarchy of abuse on children?
I just want you to answer
Assemblymember Hall. I know that you feel very strongly about this, and you have raised it numerous times.
And asking you quite fairly, are there rape gangs in London? You're the Deputy Mayor for Policing. The Mayor won't answer.
As I
It's a yes or a no.
I will happily answer the question that we do want to prioritise and make sure there's high levels of forensic support and evidence gathering on sexual abuse of all kinds,
Do you know
especially
how bad
children.
this looks? Do you
Can I-
understand how bad
Assemblymember
this
Hall,
looks
would you
for
like me
Labour?
to-
You've asked the question.
I'd asked the question and I haven't got an answer yet again.
If you'd let me answer, I'd have.
God.
I mean, I'm speechless, actually.
Dan, it looks like a gaggle of girl guides, doesn't it? I think maybe we need the patriarchy reinstated. Apart from Susan Hall, all the rest of those girls were totally embarrassing. But I mean, what can we do when it's a double think, isn't it? Orwell is overused. It almost means nothing anymore. This is Orwellian, or this is like 1984. But the main premise of surviving in the world that's visualized in that book is that you have to not believe what you see with your own eyes. You know, that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and the double think, the ability to think two things that are completely opposite at the same time. And this is what we're seeing in action. Sorry to say it again, Dan, but I don't think even Orwell could have envisaged something as terrible as this. I really don't. God help little girls.
And then I've also obviously got to ask about Diane Abbott, which has been the other big news story of the day. She has been suspended by Labour for the second time. She says that this is actually now a plot, that Slippery Starmer wants her gone. I'm just going to play you both the Radio 4 interview with James Naughtie that has led to this suspension.
Suspended, and there was a great hoo-ha. Do you look back on that with regret?
No, not at all. Clearly, there must be a difference between racism, which is about colour, and other types of racism, because you can see a traveller or a Jewish person walking down the street. You don't know. You don't know unless you stop to speak to them or you're in a meeting with them. But if you see a black person walking down the street, you see straight away that they're black. They are different types of racism.
But the effect is the same. If you are going to a synagogue on a Saturday morning and you have to have guards outside because some people might come along and want to insult you or even throw things at you, that's pretty much the same as the kind of thing you describe in your book as happening to you as a black person. The fact is, one is a person of colour and one isn't, is neither here nor there. If you suffer it, it's still damaging, isn't it?
It is here because you can spot that person of colour from hundreds of yards away. That is what is different.
You withdrew the thing. You said, look, if this is misunderstood, as you thought it was, then I apologise for it. But fundamentally, you don't believe you did anything wrong, or you didn't attempt to say something that you didn't believe.
I just think that it's silly to try and claim that racism, which is about skin colour, is the same as other types of racism. I don't know why people would say that.
David Starkey, where do you stand on this one? I mean, is there a witch hunt against Abbott within Labour?
I'm sure there is. She's a nuisance, and Starmer is desperately trying to get control of this party, which is proving very difficult. Of course, what he's doing, it seems to me, is the racing certainty that, remember, there was an extraordinary love affair between Abbott and Corbyn, which I imagine was pretty soon about to be reconsummated. Reconsummated politically.
What awful thought!
Don't make me throw up, okay? But you're talking about the fact that there's this party. It's probably going to be called Hope UK.
You mean the fruit and nut party? I mean, with Diane Abbott in it, presumably it's chocolate cream as well in the middle. But can we go back to
David?
Can we go back to the really serious point? What Diane Abbott is trying to do is to establish unique victimhood for blacks. We're in this weird society now. Rather than competing to be better, to be cleverer, to be richer, to be nobler, you compete to be victim. My dear friend Ruth Dudley Edwards came up with this wonderful term, MOPE, most oppressed people ever. And there's this intense competition. It used to be won by the Irish, the Irish being oppressed by the wicked Brits for 800 years. The Jews, of course, terribly good at it. The horrors of the Holocaust, and I think that is the real issue. Why is there this special, sudden turning of the left against Jews? Because there's a determination to dethrone the Holocaust as the moral barometer, which you have to do if you want to elevate the Palestinians. Another group claiming MOPE status, you have to dethrone them, but at the same time, people like Diane Abbott want to make slavery, want to make the black experience the ultimate moral arbiter, and to give themselves that leverage which establishes them, bluntly, as Enoch Powell said, you hand the whip hand to the black man. That is their determination, and they're doing it ruthlessly. They do it consistently, and thanks to everything that I've been saying about the madness of our human rights laws, the law is increasingly supporting them, which is why we see things like reparations suddenly being on the cards again. We've got to understand this is coherent. It's very easy just to see Diane Abbott as a mad old woman, right? And very easy. That's not true. What she is doing is espousing real doctrine. I was watching just recently a major exchange on American TV with a black woman who had been accused of racism by a white woman. Very frequently happens now because blacks will claim privileges over them. And the black woman ranting, I am black, I cannot be racist. Let's again look at one memorable quotation from Diane Abbott. You may remember back at the time of a dispute about nursing in the NHS. She said, why are we importing blue-eyed white Swedish nurses as opposed to good native black women? Direct racism. Direct anti-white racism. And we've got to understand this. There has to be this willingness to fight back. We've been throttled by being nice. We've been throttled by being polite. We've been throttled by law. It's time to stop.
Lois?
Well, what I'd like to say is if she feels that Jewish people don't get racism in the same way that black people do, she should tell that to little boys walking to synagogue, Orthodox Jewish boys who are obviously Jewish and get loads and loads and loads of abuse and stuff whenever this stuff flares up, especially about Israel. So it's complete and utter nonsense for her to say that only black people get physically attacked in the street and things like that. I don't agree with that at all. But I do agree with I keep on wanting to call you Dr. Starkey. I agree totally with what David's just said. We need, when I was growing up, I didn't actually believe that I was held back by being a female at all. And I don't believe it ever has. In fact, I think it has helped me enormously in lots of different ways. But this whole victim thing, we need to get back to wanting to be the best version of ourselves, not have something wrong with us, not compete to have some sort of problem, whether it's ADHD or things like that. Even having fat, ugly women in adverts. I don't want to aspire to look like that, but it's true. You see these underwear adverts, and they've got tummies hanging over. I don't want to look like that. When I was a little girl, the women that were on the front of magazines and in adverts were perfect. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be the best.
Yeah, let's bring aspiration back. Let's bring aspiration back. Absolutely, very well put. The Salem witch trials of British celebrities being driven by the BBC, the same organisation, can I just remind everyone, that harboured two of Britain's most prolific and famous paedophiles in Jimmy Savile and Hugh Edwards for decades, continues at pace. So now we see John Turode, who was the co-host of MasterChef, never had any complaints against him, but he gets tied up in this investigation because of Greg Wallace being the sort of working class market stall trader who makes a few dirty jokes. And all of a sudden, he's sacked. And he's sacked for what's described as racial language, but no one knows what racial language is being talked about. And Turode himself says, I have no recollection of this apparent event where I said something at a social function after work to a person who wasn't offended, but someone overheard who was. But this is what I call a liberal witch hunt. I think Piers Morgan is right to say Salem wants its witch trials back, because we now learn what John Turode's, according to the BBC, career-ending offence was. Revealed in today's Sun, race rap. Turode axed by BBC after he's accused of using the N-word singing Kanye West's Gold Digger. The Sun understands John Turode repeated lyrics from rapper Kanye West's hit Gold Digger, which contain a racial slur at an after-work gathering 6 or 7 years ago. So think about this for one moment. He sung a song. He sung a pop song that if you are someone who is non-white in this country, you can sing completely fine. However, if you happen to be white, it will finish you off. And I mean, the details of the story are crazy. So the Sun reports that Turode is said to have used the word again while chatting to a pal on the BBC show's production team, but he denies ever using the word, says he's devastated by it, and that, by the way, this member of the production team was a friend and didn't take offence. So this is nuts. It is total overreach. And can I just say, shame on you, Richard Osman, who treats himself, this is like the author and he's the host of, what's it called, Pointless. And he believes that he is the moral arbiter of the entertainment industry, and he decided to join this witch hunt against John Turode on his own podcast. Watch.
In terms of the John Turode thing, which was allegations of using racist language, John Turode says, I don't recall it. I don't believe it happened, he said, but the people who've gone through that report and who've talked to people who were there at the time do believe it happened. And by the way, there's all sorts of things that weren't upheld because they couldn't say for certain they believed it happened. But, you know, on this particular occasion, it's not woke gone mad. You know, he used, I think, probably the worst racial slur there is, and they found that to be substantively true. They found evidence that they were happy with that was true. He is saying, I definitely didn't do it. I certainly can't remember it.
To my superstar panel, Lois Perry and Doctor David Starkey CBE. And man, David, let's be honest, you know a bit about being cancelled by the BBC for using racial language. And when is this going to end? Like, what do you think? What do you make of it? Poor John Turode.
Well, of course, what's extraordinary is first, of course, as you said, for a black man to use this word that is now so terrible that people faint, swoon, are able to sue for vast sums of money, destroy careers. For a black man to use it is completely fine. Similarly, let's use another word which I can use if I refer to myself, you know, as a pufter or whatever. It's ironical if Lois or you, well, you can too, possibly.
Can I say it as well, please?
So just 1 second. It's this ludicrous fetishization of language. And we see it in all sorts of ways. I mean, can we go back? Because I regard this as utterly trivial. I know you're all interested in showbiz. This is trivial. We spend far too much time talking about people.
Yes, but his career and life is over, David.
No,
I mean,
I agree
they are trying to drive this guy to suicide, and Greg Wallace too. And because I've been through it, I feel like when I see it happening, I have to speak up for these people, you know?
Yeah, no, I understand. But my understanding is, now correct me if I'm wrong, ITV is defending him.
Thank God. Yes, they haven't cancelled him for once.
He's still got his job. He's still got his job
on ITV, but not the BBC. I mean, his big job was MasterChef.
That's absolutely clear. But once again, can we just pull back? What is going on? we now have a world in which people's careers are ruined for completely preposterous reasons. I mean, look at the big story that's been at the background all of this week, the Afghan story. There's been this extraordinary fact, as we've now discovered, that the man who's just been appointed First Sea Lord was directly responsible and in command of the unit which committed this leak. He's asked, will he resign? No, of course I shan't. Do you know what? Room was made for him as First Sea Lord. The man who expected to get it was dismissed for having a consensual affair with a fellow officer. In other words, something totally unimportant. We have, in our public life, we dismiss people for trivial reasons and keep them in position for absolutely disgraceful, scandalous conduct. Everywhere you look in the armed forces, in the police, we were talking about the scandals in Essex, everywhere you look, the civil service, people do the most dreadful things, and they're in office. They retain their pensions. They get promoted. Whereas you utter a word out of line, you have a minor affair, and immediately the whole of this preposterous Salem police comes down on you. We need dismissal for proper offences. We have this gigantic, merely verbal displacement activity.
And there's no difference now in the way that something like this is covered between like actual rape. So like a serious sexual crime.
Rape is fine, especially if it's the rape of little white girls and
true.
it's men that are of a different background that, to her that are doing it. Then the BBC is totally fine. The BBC is allowed to spout all kinds of anti-Semitic nonsense, continuously posting stuff and reporting on Israel, which is factually incorrect, and then having to apologise all the time. But what I think's actually happened here, I think, Dan, they wanted a clean slate at MasterChef. So I think that they were just looking for anything that they could do to get rid of him. Because it's so ludicrous what they found, allegedly, that I honestly just think that they just wanted to get two new, completely fresh people for MasterChef. And that's why they've gone for him.
Well, yes, because
he looks like a
Lois,
really lovely man, doesn't he?
Oh,
Look
no,
at his face. He's not a bad man.
Well, I had Christine Hamilton on earlier in the week, and she was on MasterChef, made it to the final city, was absolutely lovely. But Lois, I would also say this is a big part to do with the fact he is a straight white man, and the BBC treats straight white men differently. And I'll give you an example, Lois, because Naga Munchetty, who's the host of the BBC Breakfast show, and by the way, let me be very, very clear, Lois, I am not advocating for her to be fired, but she has faced two almost identical allegations. So not in terms of racism, of course, but that she made a sexualized joke which caused a complaint from some, prissy staff member at BBC Radio 5 Live where she works, and that she also was accused of bullying a younger staff member at BBC Breakfast. But of course, the BBC seems to have total double standards, because why is there one rule for John Turode, who's out, but a completely different rule for Naga Munchetty? Well, we know why. We know why.
Well, we know, don't we? But the question is, how can they justify it without accepting what we know to be the truth? And that you're right. I think white men, whether they're gay or straight, are actually penalised at the BBC. I don't actually believe that, that your sexuality has anything to do with it now. I think it's just white men, and especially white men of 40 and over. There seems to be, they've got rid of nearly everybody now, haven't they? I mean, if you want to see any white man over the age of 40, you have to watch Talk TV or GB News or your wonderful show. Are you over the age of 40, Dad?
Oh yes, I am. Of course I am.
Oh right, okay.
Of course I am.
I managed to slip in a little
flattering me. What about you, David? Are you?
I'm 27, and I've been 27 for 16 years.
Well, look, I love you both. You are two of my absolute favourite guests, and goodness, we've covered it all today. So, of course, Doctor David Starkey CBE are now on the advisory board of Restore Britain. And by the way, I've got to tell everyone to subscribe because I love it. David Starkey has his own YouTube channel now where you see a whole plethora of fascinating content. And Lois Perry is, of course, the UK and Europe director for the Heartland Institute. Thank you both so much. But now we're going to reveal today's worst Briton in the world. Well, actually, it's this week's the worst Briton in the world this week. And to your comments, Michelle Bennett Snow 5228 says it should be Zia Yusuf who is making a mockery of Reform and Nigel Farage. But Lou Masters 8197 says, I have to say those who banned the British schoolgirl from school because she was wearing a Union Jack flag dress, and she is one of the nominees, who Galloping Cat 1745 says it has to be Jane Delves. What is worse, than crushing a child's spirit? Her school systematically worked to program children to be ashamed of their country and culture. Not cool at all. From Cosmic Lover 293, Rishi Sunak. And she's passionate about this. She says, you liar, Sunak, you bloody treacherous idiot. Why didn't you vet these people? This is on the Afghan scandal, of course. Why didn't you ask the people of this country? You have put us in danger, put us almost in bankruptcy. All those people who have come in were not interpreters. You can't find out who they are. 19 members of one family living scot-free, encouraged to pay for compensation from the taxpayer, paying the legal aid, paying for everything. You're all liars. I hope the Tories and Labour Party is blown out of the water, not literally, colloquially. You lot will never be forgiven, ever. And I have to be honest, Cosmic Lover, I think you're right. I really, really do. So these results are going to be very interesting, actually. So let's get to them. In fourth position, with 8% of the vote, it is the anti-Union Jack Jess head teacher from rugby, Jane Delves. In third position, with 25% of the vote, the Reform UK head of Doge, Zia Yusuf. The runner-up, with 28% of the vote, Labour Minister Darren Jones, for being completely unable to say, well, you know, what a modest income is, even though he's a Minister of the Treasury. But today's not Union Jackass, he was yesterday's Union Jackass, the worst Briton in the world this week, the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, for overseeing that absolutely appalling Afghan cover-up scandal. And I do have to ask, all of those mainstream media organisations, why aren't you outside Rishi Sunak's house today? Why aren't you demanding accountability from the former Prime Minister? I think it stinks, actually. And I'll tell you why. Because he's part of the establishment, so they leave him alone. Okay, we're moving to Substack now to kick off our Royal after show. Big royal news, actually, today, including, can you believe this? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle accused of breaking the law over ducks in a revelation from Oprah Winfrey. This is an astonishing story. Our royal mastermind, Angela Levin's going to be here to go through all of it very shortly. Just sign up at www.outspoken.live. Thank you so much for your company all this week. We are, of course, back Monday, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. If you are watching on YouTube or Rumble, hit subscribe. If you are listening to this as a podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and by the way, if you haven't signed up as a podcast, please do so right now. Rate and review. Honestly, it makes such a difference. 5 stars if you may, but I really would appreciate it. So if you are listening as a podcast, please rate and review. If you are not listening yet as a podcast, please just go and find us wherever you get your podcasts. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Let's hope things are calm. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for